Okay, all right. We are now recording. It is time to clean up the act, okay? Promise me, Mark. Okay. I am in Santa Barbara, California. This is 2 days in a row I have been speaking with Australian composers, and what fun have I had, and am I about to have? I have a funny feeling with Australian composer Mark John McEncroe, and he has just put out a 2 CD release, My Symphonic Poems. And now that I know you a little better, I love the way the title is like My Symphonic Poems, take 'em or leave 'em kind of thing. 2 CD sets, wonderful, wonderful orchestral music, and you'll talk all about the Janacek Philharmonic, a fabulous orchestra, and making these recordings in the Czech Republic, all that good stuff. But I think I talked to you before and asked if you'd slap me around or not. But here's kind of my overview, and I hope I'm getting this right and not insulting you in any way. Your music is, of course, very, very accessible, and that's a very good thing, and I think you're proud of it. Hang on, just give me a second. But you know what's coming. I kind of describe you in my mind as kind of a contemporary Elgar. I mean, there's such beautiful imagery and beautiful landscapes in your music. It's all so tuneful and glorious, as is Elgar, but it is also in a contemporary vein. Okay, your turn. Let me have it.
Well, first of all, I'm flattered to be associated with Elgar, and you know, sort of that's a pretty good plug. So, and but yes, I write descriptive music. I'm not an academic. I don't have an academic bone in my body, and I basically write by instinct. I follow I get an idea and I develop it. And sort of I have an idea, maybe it's about this or it's about that, but basically I get all, sort of different ideas. I'm a person that's never short of an opinion about things, and so there's always a lot of things going on in my mind as to sort of that do affect what comes out. The other thing about my music, it's very emotional. I'm a very emotional person. I'm a very volatile person. I don't suffer fools, not lightly, but at all.
Thank you. I'll be leaving the room now. Thank you.
And the good thing about being old, I can pick and choose who I want to associate with.
Once again, thank you very much, Maestro.
and I like that. And sort of, and I'm in a position now I can actually do what I want and put it out there. And if people don't think it's what classical music should be these days, that's fine. They can go and listen to something else. I don't care. Sort of. I don't write for them. I write for me, and I write to put out. This is what I have to say, and this is how I want to say it. If they don't like it, fine.
Right. Mark, you have cleaned up your language considerable now that we've put the record on. Thank you very much indeed for that.
I'm trying to behave myself.
But, the very, really fascinating thing to me, you've been, if I understand it correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been in the music industry for many years, but it was like the age of 36 when you said, okay, I better learn how to play piano. And then a few years later, it's like, oh, I like this composition thing, I'll take some lessons. Tell me about all that.
Growing up, I was in boarding school, sort of, so there was no pianos. And in fact, if you grew up in 1950s Australia, if you said I play the piano, sort of, they took you out the back. But then no one took me out the back because I could look after myself, if you know what I mean. And in those days, I was very heavily into sport and all that sort of thing. And then, sort of, when I left school, basically, I discovered wine, women, and song. And I didn't have time for anything else. So jobs, I didn't take life seriously. I went at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And to me, I had this thing as a teenager. I thought, well, I'm going to party. And when I get too old to party, then I'll get serious. And that's exactly what's happened. And
by the way, that is exactly my idea, frankly, which is why I'm in so much trouble now at age 70, because I said, hey, I'm going to party while I can still move. Frankly,
well, to me it makes sense. While you're young in your energy, and the girls look at you. I mean, they don't look anymore, unfortunately, but sort of the ones that I want to look anyway. That's what it's all. And look, we could pontificate about all this intellectual rubbish, but that's not me. I'm not built that way. Sort of. I went out there and I, shall we say, enjoyed life, experienced life, and I got into all sorts of trouble, and I loved every minute of it, and I had some great times and great memories, and I think that comes out in my music now, because I haven't looked on the sidelines of life. I've actually lived it, you know, and that's what I write about. I write about the things that mean something to me, you know.
But what kicked it in? You know, this business of when did you say at 36? I believe that's right.
I always loved music. I mean, like in the home, you know, you know, there was no pianos in the house. There was no musical instruments or anything like that. But my dad listened to a lot of music, you know, like, and so I grew up listening to Perry Como, to Frank Sinatra, to Mantovani, to Percy Faith, all those middle of the road type artists. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then I can remember going into a record shop. I was about 17 at the time, and the guy in the record shop, he said, "I think you might be interested in listening to this." So I took it home. It was a double CD. It was Glenn Gould playing the World Kepl Clavier. And I got to tell you, the lights came on, and that it just. I cannot describe what that did to me, listening to him. I mean, since then I prefer Richter's version, you know, the Russian playing the World Tempo Clavier. But that was my first introduction to serious classical music, and it just did something to me, that volume. And then it just switched me into paying attention to music from that moment on. But the bottom line was I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. Like if I'm in this pub, I thought there's better looking girls in that pub. And then when I went there, they're probably gone. But that's how I was. And so I came from a catering family background. And so we're growing up, I knew how to cook, I knew how to run bar, I knew how to be a waiter, I could do all those sort of jobs. So when you're traveling, they're great jobs to have. So I went overseas and I started work as a chef. And then I realised actually there's not many girls in the kitchen, they're more in the bar. So then I used to gravitate to working bar, and then I ended up doing a lot live DJ all around Europe and Germany, mainly Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Holland.
Where all the blondes are.
Yeah, and needless to say, I had a ball, you know. And when I got back with wife number one, who was Swedish, you know, sort of, I got a job with EMI as a sales rep here in Australia. And within 9 months, I was inside as Decca label manager for Australia. And then after about 4 years or so, I got a transfer to EMI Sweden. So, and I was there for about another 4 or 5 years. And then by that stage, my sort of alcoholism was starting to kick in. So I thought I better quit while I'm ahead. So I said earlier about getting older and getting serious. I thought it was about time to settle down. So I came back and I said, well, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I said, well, I really want to learn music and study it properly. And I went back to the kitchen and I worked for the next 20 years as a chef till I was 50, sort of to pay for while I was studying music, basically. And I studied with private teachers. I didn't go to any institutions or anything like that. And I had some pretty good teachers. Margaret I studied with her from 2003 to 2012 about composition, and but also I had some other really wonderful teachers, piano teachers and things like that. I also had a go at clarinet, trumpet, and flute, which I didn't end up good at any of those instruments, but at least it gave me an insight to not just, like if you're playing the piano, you can say, well, I'm playing the piano, you can all go away, because I don't need you. Do you know what I'm saying? But but that's good if you get an overall picture of things. But if when you're playing, say, another instrument, and I didn't play strings, but I played wind instruments, it gives you an insight of what it would be like to be an orchestral musician, or I could look at music from a different perspective. I never became any good at playing any of those instruments, including the piano. So you'll never see me performing because I don't want to empty the hall.
Same here. I'm a lousy pianist and I'm a conductor. It's always been a crippling problem.
Let's face it. I started studying the piano at like in my mid-30s. So like you're never going to get that dexterity. You're not going to get that repertoire that people have got in by the time they're 11 and 12. So and if you're competing against those, it's not going to happen.
Your excuse is better than mine. Mine was my folks moved me to Santa Barbara from Spokane when I was about 12, and I said to myself, yes, this is my opportunity to stop taking piano lessons, which I promptly did. Anyway, then of course I went on to become a musician. Go figure. Listen, we got to do this. I have to do this quote. It's the quote on your on your CD. I have to do it because, and I have a smile on my face, but it's because you just really nail it. And so, ready? Here we go.
Yeah. Okay.
Here is Mark's quote on his CD. And stand by, everybody. Hold on to your seats, those of you who are faculty. I think I have a zillion music college faculty on my subscription list. Quote, I feel no compulsion to slavishly follow the current narrow-minded trends that classical composers feel they have to conform to. I deliberately write my music for the general music public only. My music is not written for the followers and slaves of classical academia. Ooh la la. Has your house been
100%?
And has your house been
straight from any of it?
and has your house been TP'd yet at all? Oh, is that with toilet paper all over the outside of the house? If that tradition.
No, but you see, you talk to some. I know a lot of musicians who've played, and I won't mention the names of the orchestras. But I know a lot of musicians and a lot of orchestras, and they come up with this atonal stuff, and they say, we hate playing this rubbish. So, and you talk to people, who sort of, who say, ordinary people say, we don't like listening to that rubbish. And then they're wondering why only 1% of the population, sort of doesn't want to listen to classical music. And why, if you go to a concert, they're still playing Bach, Beethoven, Schumann, Schubert, Tchaikovsky, because it's music. This rubbish that they put out today, no one wants to listen to it. And if it gets a performance, it gets once, and then it's put in the thing, and it's usually a professor who's trying to flog or hijack an orchestra to put his stuff out there.
Oh, you didn't hear that, anybody. You didn't hear that part. Go ahead.
No, I'm declaring war against these people. It's all wrong. And one day the world will move on from this nonsense and we'll get back to actually having music. That's why film music is so popular today, because it's music. And people like the emotions. If they want to be academic, then go and study mathematics or physics or something like that, and stay away from music. You don't belong there.
Okay, now I think I can help you, so that you go take your high blood pressure pills while I try and reach which is that. Okay, which is that I'm listening to a lot of music of all kinds. Luckily, I have quite a high free will spirited sort of personality. I love whatever is thrown at me. I just become fascinated by any and all of it, including your music, by the way. And help, what was I going to say? Just went blank. But the point is, I can assure you that not only are young musicians, I'm speaking about the millennials in their 30s, who are having careers really in the thick of their careers. I'm interviewing classical musicians who can sit down and improvise on the piano and whatnot. I mean, they love jazz and so on. So they're basically there's this a melding is going on. It's not quite as stuck in academia as it used to be. And of course there are those who are quite esoteric. How's that?
No comment. I believe that sort of, and there's certainly. I mean, to me, and this is obviously a personal opinion. But to me, the greatest composer of the late 20th century or middle 20th century is Shostakovich. Now, arguably so. To me, I mean, he's certainly one of the greats of the 20th. But he had melody in his music. He had a lot of melody and he had a lot of innovation in there as well. That to me is a good mix. Look, I'm not categorically saying, look, all of that stuff's rubbish. I mean, when you come up to like the Psycho scene in the Hitchcock movie, some of that music is perfectly good for a stabbing scene or something, and it has its effect, and it's probably developed, techniques on things. So it has had its form, but Schoenberg's got a lot to answer for as far as I'm concerned, but the thing is, whatever it was he set out to achieve, it's been achieved. So let's all move on and get back to playing music again. But, like my composition teacher, Margaret Bram, one of the main things that she helped me with was introducing me to the jazz chords. You mentioned jazz before. And she uses a lot of jazz chords and lots of things and South American rhythms. Because to me, one of the greatest composers of the 20th century was Antonius Carlos Jobim.
Never heard of him. Who's that?
Yeah, Jobim. I'm sure you're just having a go.
No, who is that? Antonio.
The guy who wrote "Girl from Ipanema."
Oh,
Bossa Nova.
See, now you may properly spank me. I'm a classicist through and through. I'm trying to get past it, but see, that's why I didn't recognize.
To me, he just changed jazz and gave jazz a South American flavor, and it's permeated into in ways. And see, this is where I find, that a lot of the classical fraternity have put themselves into a little box and wonder why no one wants to listen anymore. Because they're not. And I can remember I went to a couple of master classes down at the Con here in Sydney, and I brought up different popular composers, and the teacher just looked at me as though I had leprosy or something and said, "Look, we don't talk about that rubbish in these rooms. We talk about music."
Ooh.
And I got up and walked out of the room because I knew he was an idiot.
Yeah, and also I hope Australia it's beginning to sound like Australia is even more, in many ways, more behind, shall we say, aesthetically than the U.S., which can also be a bit behind. Oh boy, are we both in trouble now? But very interesting.
Well, not necessarily, because look where we're geographically situated. It's as simple as that. We're down near the South Pole, which is great. If the world goes to war, we'll be the last one to be affected.
Yes, remember on the beach. You remember you remember the film On the Beach.
Yeah. With Ava Gardner and Frank. No, it wasn't Frank Sinatra. Who was it? I always remember the girls. I never remember the guys.
But the Aussies are the last to die. How reassuring is it? Listen, hold it. We've got to get back on topic here for a second. Somehow. Let's see. We've talked about your career, making that decision at a I hate to say late, but age 36, stuff like that, and now I see discipline and willpower, for sure.
Well, you see, as you get older, you kind of slow down. I mean, people said to me, "Why didn't you study music when you were a kid?" I said, "You got to be kidding! I couldn't sit still for 3 seconds, let alone concentrate." I mean, you hear about it that ATD or whatever, attention deficit disorder. I probably had that in bucket loads. I don't know.
ADHD. It came to mind.
Whatever it is that they call it, So the thing is that I just couldn't sit still. I lived in my head. I was out there in cyberspace somewhere, and that living in my head sort of is what I've actually brought to my music, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense of the music now, because as I've been kind of trying to find a way of putting it in words, each of these symphonic suites and poems not only have a title and a story, but they have a real narrative, a real sequence to sequence narrative. And as I was trying to kind of explain, I know there's a story you see and hear there, because these sequences are so specific. And then therefore, here we go with another question. How do you expect an audience to react? They don't need to know what the story, do they? At all, do they?
Well, as I said earlier before we turned on the interview, originally I call my symphonic suites symphonies, but then when I sort of put them past people in the academic circles, they said, "Oh, you can't call that a symphony because it doesn't do this or doesn't do that or doesn't do that." So I said, "Well, if I call it symphonic suites, am I going to get criticised?" "No, because then you can make up the story." Okay, done. They're called symphonic suites. That's why. But also, apart from that, I would love to have $1 for every time people who have listened to my music have said, "Your music should be in movies because it conjures up, our thoughts about all sorts of things." And so that's always been in my head. And so like I've always sort of thought, well, I hope film producers one day notice my stuff and want to use it in movies, or whatever.
Let me get a word in here, because you just took one of my most important questions away from me, and I'm so glad you did, because I was a little hesitant, but I was going to say something about this music is like you are a composer looking for a film, or vice versa, something like that.
Well, yeah, and everybody who's listened to my stuff always, without fail, have always said your music should be in the movies. I don't consciously go out to do that. I don't consciously go to do anything. I get an idea and I develop it, and that's it. It's the beginning and the end, and then I go to put it out, and I think, have I got enough pieces to go to Palmer with for a CD? And they say yes, and then I go through the whole process of getting it recorded and all of this sort of thing. I say that would fit well. I mean, I'm lucky because I've had that experience of working with EMI, for years, and so I kind of understand how the music business works, because I spent basically a lot of my 20s and early 30s doing that stuff. So it helps me in like putting together that project with that project with that project, et cetera, and I like Palmer because they give unknown composers like me a go, and give me a voice, Yes. So I'm very grateful for that, sort of, because if you go to the big record companies, well, then they say, there's the door, piss off, sort of thing, pardon my French.
Don't worry. Most of my audience are Americans. They won't understand.
That's the reality. Like I can put the CD out myself, but no one's ever going to hear it or hear about it. So I'm very grateful for a company like Palmer. I'm very happy with what they've done for me, and
Bob Laporte is right on top of things. I mean, it's a musician's company. It's for us, all of us who are producing CDs. I'm not. I'm just a retired conductor, making a couple bucks as a critic. So, Palmer does a good job.
What you're doing is needed too, and I'm very glad that of your situation. Because it all helps.
Sure. That's the point, and I might as well boast of it. In fact, I forgot my whole plug. Thank you for reminding me. I was supposed to be running a little business here. What's going to happen, so that everybody knows, they already know this, but this interview, and I can't wait to get this one up and see how the meter jumps on the ratings. It's going to go through the roof, I'm sure of it, if anybody gets as far as watching you begin. But what's going to happen is we're going to put this interview with Mark up on his dedicated page for his My Symphonic Poems double CD set. And do we have time? We have time. We'll talk a little more about it. This business of how you divided the two CDs, one about the natural world and one about problems that people have. Let's just go there for a while. But let me just finish my plug here. Anyway,
I just want to make a point, because in case we run out of time,
sure.
I want to make a special thank you to my mate Mark Saliba.
Yeah.
Because and also to Margaret Brandman as well, but Margaret first, and actually it was Margaret who introduced me to Mark Saliba. I said, I want to learn orchestration, and she said, well, I know this guy, and I met. Sort of that was, and so I met Mark, and we've been buddies ever since, and been working together ever since. And before this interview finishes, I got to say that he's like my music partner, And so when you talked about orchestration before, I do very detailed piano reductions.
Yeah.
We talk about on Skype about like musically, like what I'm hearing, how I think. He just gets what I'm trying to do. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that sort of
exactly. And again, you took right away from me about 3 whole questions there, but it was perfect because help. I don't have his name to my eyesight in my old age. Once more, your colleague.
Yeah, so if anybody likes my music, particularly all my piano stuff, that's just I just do that. Yeah. That's my stuff. But the thing is, anything that I've done orchestrally that people like, then he needs to sort of you be credited for a lot of that too. Because
and let's have his name once more, because I still
Mark
can't find.
J. Saliba.
Okay, and I was going to ask you about that because Mark, of course, you mentioned that he orchestrated the passing beautifully.
Yeah.
Is he pretty much your orchestrator on this?
Well, anything I've done orchestrally, he's orchestrated.
Oh, okay.
Everything.
Beautiful stuff.
That's where it started. That was the first job we did together.
Okay, now I get it. Well, he's a great orchestrator, and I love the way he knows how to work with the brass tonalities, the brass sounds and balances, and woodwinds as well. When you mentioned that you had some experience with winds, that I thought that you of course have that input. But also, I was going to ask you just this whole idea about how you collaborate when you have an idea in your head about what you think a piece should sound like, and Mark may have another idea of how he might orchestrate that. But apparently, you get on like. Well,
we're like brothers, sort of we talk on Skype like he's just next door, sort of just about every second day on Skype, yakking about this or about that, solving the world's problems and trying to anyway, but no one wants to listen.
There you go again, being negative. Ever since you went off drugs, you're just no, just kidding.
Oh, no, I'm a very happy person, but I see like with very much tongue in cheek, like I can't help myself, like I'm a bit of a stirrer.
Tell us about how, because we have a few minutes left. Give me this idea of how you split the two CDs, how you organize them. You know what I'm talking about, the natural world and then the kind of personal world of different things. Go ahead.
Well, the thing is that basically I've up to date I've written 10 symphonic poems, and so they didn't fit on one CD, so I did a double CD.
Of course.
And so I talked with the guys in Parma and said, how well, let's put these ones on this side. We ran out of room, so the rest of them went to the other CD. That's the real story.
Oh.
So there's no rhyme and reason to this. And I mean, like the first one I wrote was The Passing, and that was the very first piece that I actually wrote that was not intended to be a piano piece. And Mark Saliba, when we first met, that was the first thing we ever worked on. So that's and that is about the passing actually means is like when my sponsors in AA used to say, apart from giving up the grog, you got to sort of anything that you did or your whole thought mechanisms, put everything on the table and review your whole life and all your thoughts, and if something doesn't work in your head anymore or it's not appropriate, move on. And that's what the passing's all about. It's about that process, The next piece, that's the very last piece on the double CD, A Celebration of the Natural World. When I was developing that, I actually worked on that with Margaret Brandman. And we worked on that together. So I have to thank her a lot for what's in that particular, I mean, see, like, I'm not one to study a book and then this thing and all the academic depth. I said, look, here's a piece. Tell me what's wrong with it so we can fix it. That's sort of, and they say, but you need to learn this. I don't want to know about that stuff. I'm getting old. I haven't got time. This is a piece I've written. Tell me how I can improve it. That's how I learn things. You know what I'm saying? And so,
and it seems to me from I interviewed Margaret yesterday. It seems to me from getting to know Margaret that she's just the woman to come right back at you and say, okay, here.
Well, we were two very strong personalities, and but we got a lot done, and I learned a lot. It's as simple as that, and like she'd take a lot of my earlier pieces, particularly on the first piano CD, and she'd take my ideas and show me how to shape them, because I didn't have a clue. Let's face it, sort of, and from that it's given me. And then, like on the orchestral side, Mark took over from that, so that I've learned a lot about how to structure things. And that's how I learn. I don't go and read a book and say, oh yes, that's a very nice book, and then I remember the stuff and waltz off into the sunset. I'm not built that way. I've got to actually do something. Like in my days as a chef, somebody had come into the kitchen with a briefcase full of references, and they'd say, well, these are my references. I said, look, I don't need toilet paper. I said, there's the stove. Cook me a mushroom omelette. You've got 20 minutes. And if they couldn't cook a mushroom omelette in 20 minutes, they're out the door. And they said, but look at my references. I said, if you don't know in a professional kitchen where all the things is and can go to the stove and give me an omelette in 20 minutes, you don't belong in here, sunshine. I approach my music in the same way. It's from a practical point of view. And both Margaret and Mark can teach me things in a very practical way that I can use. If I went to uni to do a Bachelor of Music, I'd probably fail because I'd go in one ear and out the other, but sort of like Margaret showed me how to put chords together, so that they all related. So, and the colours and the difference in jazz chords and ordinary chords, and classical chords and pop chords, the whole lot. Because music is just music. It shouldn't be, it's there. It's just music. It's like you go to a restaurant and people say to me, but and I cook something. And people say, well, how did you like the food? And they said, but I'm not a chef. I said, I didn't ask you about your career. I asked you, did you like the food? Like, surely you know if you liked it or you didn't like it. And to me, it should be the same with music. You either like it or you don't like it. And I don't expect everybody to like my music. I certainly don't like everything I hear, but, but I own what I do, and I do it in a very practical way, so that if people want to listen to it or buy it or this or that or use it, that's fine. If they don't, it's also fine,
Well spoken. I can't go any further than that. I think this is just about perfect timing to wind it down. And I just keep thinking of Margaret also. What an experience! Also an entrepreneurial career. I mean, out there playing in the bands of Sydney, and just an amazing career as well.
But her teaching books are really helpful.
Are they? Yeah. So she also does that. Yeah.
And see, I still go to them from time to time. I said, no. I remember something about that chords progression and things like, and you see, you go to an ordinary textbook and they'll tell you what Beethoven did 200 years ago. And I said, I don't want a history lesson. I just want to know about how these chords fit together. Or practical stuff that I can actually use and get to very quickly.
And Margaret's books do that, huh? She's real clear.
Her books do that better than any other that I've ever seen.
Wonderful, and I think I have it even up, a link to her books on her website, something like that. Listen, we got to wind it down. I have been talking with Mark John McEncroe. I think I got it right again. Still, My Symphonic Poems, Orchestral Images, a 2-CD suite of his own music. I think you have a pretty good idea, everybody, the kind of personality we're dealing with here, and that he is surely and truly and forevermore his own man, may I say, without misspeaking in any way. But the point is very, very interesting orchestral music, as we've kind of discussed, very cinematic, very accessible, beautiful orchestrations based on your work with your colleague, wonderfully put together and constructed. Thank you, Margaret. I presume it would help train you on that, getting these chords to work, getting things to make sense. It all makes sense. Wonderful talking.
Well, both her and but Mark, who I've been working with, a lot. He owns a lot of the credit of what I've been able to achieve. Both of them, actually.
Yeah, but he's really your right hand person.
Yeah.
The guy who orchestrates your brain, what's coming out of your brain. CD again is My Symphonic Poems, Orchestral Images. I'm going to put all of that stuff up, the links to buy it, the links to Mark's website, everything I can think of to put up the audios, photographs, the works, so that and I'm going to send an e-blast out so that my folks can get up there, and then I'll follow with a few remarks. My reviews are now becoming remarks these days. Great pleasure meeting you. Can't wait to get this site up, and I can't wait to see how people respond to what has been, to say the very least, a lively interview. Thanks in Australia for the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Dan.